and I think I'll make a start because otherwise we're going to be running way too late. Can you all hear me all right? Great, excellent, okay. So I'm Don McQueen. I'm going to say a few words about myself in a minute because most of you probably don't know me, or if you do know me, you probably only know my name. But I'm going to talk a bit about business excellence. I am a businessman. I've been a businessman all my life. So I'm going to say a few things about my experiences about running organizations, both Christian organizations and secular organizations. So we'll just come and take some seats. And this is what I want to go through today. Don't worry, it sounds like the whole MBA agenda in one meeting. We're not going to do the whole of an MBA, don't worry. But I'm going to give you a few of my experiences, a few of my tips, a few of my suggestions as to how good organizations are well run, but within a biblical context, with a God guidance criteria, and thinking how does a Christian work in a secular organization? Because that's what a lot of what I've been doing in a lot of the organizations that I chair and I lead. So I'm going to talk a bit about business planning, a bit about financial planning, a bit about strategy, a bit about marketing, monitoring and reporting, governance, and a few questions if we've got time. So first of all, me. I am the chairman of Switched On Education Limited. Graham and I and Cheryl met probably 13 years ago when my son with special educational needs, he's here, Sam, needed a new education. We found Switched On. I was very skeptical to begin with, loved it, got involved, invested in the company, and we're here today. I don't need to go through more than that, but I am the chairman of Switched On Education. I'm also the chairman of Bournemouth Christian School, which uses the curriculum. I'm also chairman of about 6 other secular organizations, both from small, relatively small startup businesses, all the way through to major multinationals. I'm an ex-strategy consultant, so I know a few things about strategy, and it's probably the most overused word in business. Most people don't even know really what it means. So I'm going to give you some definitions of what I think strategy is about and how you make strategies work. I have an MBA from INSEAD, which is in France. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started 20 companies, probably myself. Not all successful. Most of my learning has come from failures. I've learned far more from failures than I have my successes. But you know, when you learn from your failures, hopefully your successes will be bigger. My definition of a failed entrepreneur is one that stopped trying. I'm an ex-board member of various schools, so I understand the educational context, as well as 2 or 3 universities. I used to sit on a 20,000 plus UK university. I was the nominal businessman on the board. And that was a very interesting experience about higher education and how it works. I'm also now a business mentor and a consultant, and I spend a lot of my time helping investors understand what to invest in. And I founded an award-winning angel network in the UK, which is one of the larger Southern England angel networks, which is a network of high net worth individuals investing in startup operations, investing in businesses, and helping those entrepreneurs grow and develop successfully. So I see an awful lot of business plans coming across through my organizations. I do an awful lot of, or have in the past done an awful lot of business planning. I now mentor and help other people with business planning. So why plan? I mean, we often hear in the Christian world, the way of the Lord. Let's just leave it to the Lord. He will lead us to where we need to get to. And my view is we should pray in earnest, but we should plan in detail. And, in Proverbs 14, it says, the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. But the folly of the fool is deception. So, we're not fools. We need to be prudent. We need to be discerning. And the wisdom of people with prudence is planning. And while, of course, the Lord will open doors for us, of course, the Lord will help us in our progress, we need to take responsibility for the planning of our organizations and the future of our organizations. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. How many of you know where you want your organization to be in 5 years' time? Can put your hands up. You have a really clear, have you got a written document that says where your organization will be? Great if you have, but in my experience, very few organizations have. And even the ones that have may not pass my criteria of what that really means, okay? Because I'm going to talk through things about what really helps you in terms of understanding where your organization's going and put it down on paper so you know where you're going. So in order to do that, you need to know where you are now. So an analysis of what are your strengths and weaknesses? What are the threats and opportunities that you have in your organization today? So the now. You also need to know where you want to go, in 5 years' time, maybe in 1 year time, maybe in 10 years' time. But you need to be reasonably specific. And you're going to set SMART objectives in terms of where that future is. I'm going to explain what SMART is. Does anyone know what SMART means? How many know what SMART acronym means? I'm going to explain that for those of you who don't. But to me, SMART is critical about setting up an organizational future. And to me, strategy is about how you get from where you are now to where you're going. It's as simple as that. It's a set of principles that guide the decisions that you make to allow you to move from where you are now to where you want to be. So, first of all, SMART objectives. SMART stands for specific. So your objectives need to be specific. They can't be general. I want to grow. Well, grow into what? Grow into things. I want to be the best. That's not specific. It needs to be, I want to be the best at something. It needs to be measurable. I've got 2 examples here we'll go through in a minute, but it needs to be agreed. There's no point as a leader setting out a set of objectives, but not communicating it, nor agreeing it with your elders, with your business partners, with your staff. Everyone needs to buy into those objectives, or they won't be thought through the organization. So they need to be agreed, agreed with the other decision makers, but then delegated and understood by the whole organization, if possible. They need to be realistic. We all need to keep our feet on the ground to a degree. We know God can open amazing and do amazing things, but we also need to be realistic in what we can achieve, both with the grace of God and with our own strength and hard work. And they need to be timely. There's no point setting an objective if you don't have any sense as to when you're going to try and achieve it. Otherwise, we have no idea whether we've succeeded when we've got somewhere. If we don't plan, who knows when we've been successful? What is written down in that plan says whether you've been successful or not. And it doesn't really matter where you want to go. The future could be, we want to shrink, we want to retire, we want to be smaller. It doesn't need to be growth. It doesn't need to be massively different from where we are now. Maybe your objectives are to do what we're doing today the same in 5 to 10 years' time. That is a perfectly acceptable objective. And it says in it, then it affects the strategy that you take. So here are 2 examples of the first one. We want to grow successfully over the coming years. I see a lot of organizations saying that, all well-meaning in principle, but it's not smart. It's not specific. It's not measurable. It's not, it could be agreed, but it's not, is it going to be realistic? There's no timely. So the next one is much more what I would like to see in the businesses that I'm involved in terms of any objective they set. So we all agree that we want to have 200 students in the school by January 24. That's specific. It's measurable. If you've only got 199, okay, you've nearly succeeded, but not quite. If you've got 220, you've exceeded your objective. So it's measurable. It's agreed because it says it's agreed. The whole board or the trustees have agreed it. It's realistic. Depends where you are now. You may have none, and that actually is unrealistic, but for the majority of organizations, clearly, maybe. And it's timely because it's set by a date. So that's what SMART means. And it's a really good practice for when you're thinking about futures of your organization, whatever they may be, Christian or secular, that you think about objectives in the SMART acronym, a really important business tool. And then strategy. So strategy, as I said, is the way in which organizations need to think about the way and the principles and the methods and the priorities that they have to go from where they are now to where you want to get, to achieve your SMART objectives. So to me, as an ex-strategy consultant, I spend a lot of time in organizations looking at what the abilities, the assets, the internal resources, the concepts inside the organization, the products they've got, the staff they've got, the resources they've got, the financial resources, and then the opportunities in the marketplace in terms of the size of the market they can address, the resources that could attract in, and other things, and trying to come up with what is the best strategy for this organization to achieve its objectives. And each of you need to do that in your own way in terms of what do we want to have as the principles that govern, the way in which we're going to take decisions. Because strategy is about decision making. When opportunities come along, do you take that opportunity or you say, actually, no, that's going to distract us from the direction that we want to go? And it's a really good principle to say, actually, my third point here, it defines what you do not do as much as what you do do. I've seen many organizations who, some businessman comes along and says, I can do this for you, I can help you fill up your resources, I can move you this, I can do that. The question is, do you accept that offer? Do you engage with that or not? And it comes back to the principles that you're trying to do to achieve what you're trying to do. You might say yes as what I would call tactical distraction. In other words, it's not strategic to accept this offer or to work with this business partner. It may not be sensible to do it from a strategic point of view, but actually it achieves some what I call sideline opportunities that might open up some other doors later. But you accept doing it as a tactical distraction rather than a strategic direction. And so you do it with your eyes open, knowing this is a distraction which we accept is a distraction from our overall direction. And so you do it openly, and it also gives you the framework upon which you might want to reject some. So strategy is about having a set of principles and guidelines to help you in decision making. It means that you don't have to debate every single opportunity in great detail, because you've got a framework upon which to analyze those opportunities, those decisions, and you therefore have a framework to allow you to make easier decisions quicker with less data than you might otherwise do. So it gives focus. I know we've talked a lot about focus from the various other speakers over this conference. But Graham will tell you that, now Graham is a fantastic businessman. He has got so much energy, he's got so much passion, he's got so many ideas, and my job as the chairman is to stop him doing everything he'd love to do, right? True, Graham? So focus makes successful organizations. So it defines what you don't do as well as what you do. And focus is absolutely critical for business success. And in fact, if I was to summarize what I do as a chairman of various organizations, I would say my job is to threefold, is to, one, ask the difficult questions and to stop the chief executive from doing the things they really would like to do, but do the things that the business plan says they've got to do. Yeah? and that is sometimes very difficult because, I know when I was a chief exec of some relatively large organizations, you get it buried in the detail. You get, opportunities coming. You get ideas. You get the staff coming and saying, can't we do this? Can't we do that? And you lose the big picture when you're running the organization on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. And you need somebody who is outside the organization to come in and say, focus. Just remember the big picture. Remember the 5-year plan. Remember the calling that we've got. Remember where we're going. Don't get buried in the detail, but focus on the key things. So financial planning. Yeah. Annual budgets. I presume, is there anyone who doesn't do annual budgets? Good. Okay, because annual budgets look at the basis upon which each year needs to be set. And annual budgets to me are really important. Yes, they're financial objectives of what we're planning to achieve in the next year. They give us a measure about how we're doing as we go through the year. But for me, there's 2 or 3 really important principles about annual budgets. One is, don't change them during the year. Set them before the beginning of the year, and don't change them. Now, your forecasts are what then may change away from the budget. So in my organization, I always have a budget that's set before the year starts, and I measure the performance of the company against that budget, irrespective of what happens. What I will ask them to do, though, is to, let's say, each month or each term or whatever, when they're reporting back, that they forecast what they genuinely think the rest of the year is going to be like. It might be budget for the rest of the year, but it might be less. And therefore, we have both the reality of the actuals as we've gone through the month of the year, you've got the budget that we set, which was the plan for the year, and we've got the forecast as to what we realistically now think we're going to achieve. And you need, to some extent, all three numbers, because decision-making is about being realistic about where you're going and what's realistically going to happen, and being able to deal with problems before they arise. And those systems of being able to forecast what you think is going to happen allows you to foresee issues that you think might arise and therefore be able to make decisions in advance of that to be able to prepare for things. So budgets are really important, forecasts are really important. My advice is don't change your budgets halfway through the year. And I know some organizations do things. The other thing I want to see in my budgets is economics, not just financial numbers, but unit numbers, numbers of students, numbers of staff, average cost per staff. So a lot of what I call economic ratios that help you plan the business and other things. So volume and unit data. And that allows you to do scenario planning. You know, what happens if we were to raise our prices, for example, or what happens if we were to give larger discounts, or other things. So it allows you to help build up a real economic model of your business and your school to be able to do what-if planning. And it's through that what-if planning that you can begin to see, actually, what's the economic implications of making some decisions at the board about changing staff structures, building a new building, changing numbers of students, bringing in a new level of activity, bringing in a new investments. It allows you to think about investments in a very different way. And obviously, as an investor myself, as a businessman looking at very many business plans, businessmen want, or investors want, three things really. They need a business plan, so that they can understand what's really there. They need a capable management, and a management that understands that business plan, and they need a return on their investment. And you've got to show that return on investment. You're not going to get investment other than the donations. If you're going to get a proper, what I call a non-arm's length business relationship, whether it's a loan or an equity investment, without being able to explain to an investor a return on investment. Of course, we all have charitable donations. Of course, we all have, giving and tithing. But if you're looking for business investments, they need a return on investment. That needs to come through good budgeting, good business planning, and the ability to show competent management of those resources. And I try to push all my organizations to data-driven decision-making, data-driven analysis, so that we have sufficient data to be able to make the decisions that the organization needs to do in advance of the problems that might arise. So cash modeling, profit and loss modeling, balance sheets. Now, do most of your schools have a balance sheet? Yeah, so it's great. Again, balance sheets are often the financial report that's left to the last. Well, don't worry about the balance sheet. The balance sheet just takes care of itself. We need to understand cash, we need to understand P&L, and balance sheet doesn't really matter. But actually, balance sheet is a really important concept for an investor. If you want to gain investment, they need to know, are you utilizing the assets that you're running well, both financial and physical? And so the return on investment, the return on equity, is about the management of the assets that you're running. And therefore, the balance sheet is actually really quite important for an investor point of view. And return on capital employed, return on equity ratios as well. So I'm going to say a few words about marketing. I used to run lots of organizations with large marketing departments, and I came in and I fired most of the marketers, I'm sorry to say. Okay. So I'm going to put my hand up to be, I'm not a fan of marketing. All right? However, marketing is an important function if it's done right, but it needs to be focused on sales. I'm putting my secular sales hat on. I know schools don't necessarily do sales, but I'm teaching. Well, I'm sorry. I'm talking as though I'm a general business principles. Marketing needs to be driven to sales. And therefore, you need to think about marketing not as, so one of my business partners used to say, marketing is just the flower arrangers. All they do is they put the flowers in the window, you know? I mean, it doesn't really add any value. It just makes everything look nice, you know? And I think if you've got, you know, some PR, some areas of marketing are flower arranging. What my principles are, marketing needs to be really thought about, how do you build revenue? How do you build sales? How do you promote your organization? And I always come back to marketing as being the 4 Ps: product, price, promotion, and place. So let me just run through those for those of you who may be relatively new to that concept. The product, you know, you've got to design your product, you know, which is, so most people think marketing is about promotion. Let's be honest. Most people think it's PR. It's about, you know, website advertising. It's about promoting the business. It's about putting up a website. Actually, marketing is much more than that. Much more than that. So it's about, what is your product? You know, what is the school building? How attractive is it? What's the design of your building? You know, what's the atmosphere you're creating? How do you design it? What color schemes do you have in there? What staff uniforms? What's, you know, or whatever do you have? Your academic focus is a really important part of the product that you're out there trying to promote. The technology philosophy you've got, and the teaching philosophy. You know. So again, they're elements of the product that you are creating. You know, and from a business point of view, you've got to manage that product and design that product as part of your marketing mix. The price, I mean, I think that's relatively straightforward, but it's part of marketing. You know, what is the cost that we put to the parents for their education? What discount structures do we put in there? You know, what price do we put against each student? And so that's a very important part of the overall marketing and economics of the business. Promotion is not just about website and PR. It's about many, many other ways in which you promote your business, you understand your business, and you look at the stakeholders and work with the stakeholders that you've got within your business. And place is about, you know, where really. I mean, in general business sense, it's about how do you get your product to your customer, so logistics, distribution, warehousing, those sort of things. But clearly in education, that's a slightly different concept. But it's still about, are we online? You know, do we do an online school? Do we do a physical school? Where's the physical building? What's the target market? What location are we in? Those sort of things. So, and my final point there really is where I started. You know, marketing needs to drive sales. You need to really think about what the investment we do in any marketing is about. How do we build the revenue line of the business? You know, the revenue line of the school. And I apologize if I'm mixing a little bit of what I called general secular business with Christian education, but I think, you know, what I'm trying to do is to give you some concept from the slightly more secular world with a Christian philosophy to help you think about your schools as a business. So monitoring, reporting. Unless you monitor and report, you have no idea where you are. It's probably as important as anything else. You know, we can all plan, we can all invest, we can all do good education, but unless we monitor and report, as you know through the Switched On platform for the kids, but I'm now talking about the business side of this, you don't know where you are against your SMART objectives, you don't know where you're going, you don't know really where you are. And so it's really important to do good monitoring and reporting. Being able to measure the progress is absolutely essential. Know where you are, primarily to be able to plan to get out of difficulties. So, you know, when I go to the chief executives of the companies that I run, I say, look, I don't really want to spend much time on the successes. What I want to know is about where the problems are. You know, the boards are there to help you with your problems, not to help you pat you on the back for your successes. And so, you know, no pulling the wool over eyes of the board, no hiding behind bad news. You know, the one thing I say to all my organizations is, bring me the bad news as soon as you think it. You're first aware of it. Really, really important. Communicate bad news as fast as possible. Communicate good news as slowly as possible. You know, we all love pats on the back, but actually it's sharing that bad news or the potential bad news is the way to which really you can avoid major problems in organizations and beyond. So monitoring is really, really, really important. Getting the appropriate data to make the right decisions. You know, I've seen organizations absolutely awash with data. They can't see the wood for the trees. They've got too much data. They don't, you know, analyze it in the right way. And so it's a matter of working out what's the bits of data that really drive the economics of our business. allow us to make better decisions, allow us to be able to move the organization through to the smart objectives that we set. And those are generally done through KPIs, key performance indicators. So on the university where I sat, we had 19 key performance indicators. And they were generally ratios. So staff-student ratio, numbers of students, numbers of graduates, financial ratios, return on equity, the profit per sale, per unit sale. There tend to be economic variables, and we'd set down the KPI targets for every year for our 10-year plan. And we would monitor those KPIs. Now, those KPIs generally are quite easy to measure, but you can immediately begin to see whether you're going off target along the route that you've chosen to get to your smart end game. So KPIs are really useful numbers to use, and it's not, and then management information is not just about finances. It's about understanding those KPIs. So, at a board meeting, my board meetings are a third about history. How have we done in the last month, quarter, term, whatever, year? So looking at, in detail, how have we performed? Why have we performed that way? One third about what I call near-term, what we're about to do. What are the current problems that we're dealing with? What are the current concerns we've got? What are our short-term, which I would say up to 6 months, sort of view as to what the issues are. And then a third, the longer term. What do we need to be planning and doing now in terms of being able to move the organization forward for the next 5 to 10 years? So the other thing about reporting is do it consistently. Don't do 1 year, do it every month, and then the next year, let's do it every 6 months, and then do it every 3 months. You need to be consistent. Doesn't need to be every month, but it might be every term. It absolutely has to be every year, but it needs to be really more regular than that, in my view. It probably, in school environment, most of them are term-based. In all my other secular businesses, they're all monthly. Monthly is a good measure for a secular business that's looking to grow strongly. And I'm not necessarily saying that schools all need to grow strongly. And sometimes monthly reporting in the educational cycle is not appropriate. But in my secular business world, it's all monthly. And the reports are every month, the same structure, the same format, and there'll be 50 pages. Yeah? So they're big. There's a lot of data, a lot of financial data, a lot of operational data, a lot of reports in terms of where we're going, and so you've got a lot of things for the board to be thinking about. Make sure the board members are going to come a bit. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So yeah, I'm actually onto that to some extent. So I'm going to take a few questions in a minute, but Board of Trustees and Governors. Desiree, I was so pleased you said that about, some board, you can get into a situation where chief execs are bullied, or you get the wrong people on the board, or you get a difficult group who want to go in a different direction from the executives. It's really important, though, to have a good board. And, I think almost all the speakers have said about the importance of having a positive board, one that's, supportive, one that is open, one that is challenging, but it is there basically to help you run the organization. And you need a mix of people. The most successful boards that I'm involved in have the biggest range of individuals. And the last thing you want is to have 2 Don McQueens, I can assure you. You probably don't want 2 Desirees either. So, what you need to think about is having a board that's got as many different characters, attitudes, experiences as possible, because it's through that debate do you get the best decisions. But once those decisions are made, you need to make sure that the board has collective responsibility for those decisions. You don't have people going off and saying, I don't agree with the board in public. It's really important that boards not support the management teams and the executives, that they may disagree in a board meeting, but once that decision's made, everyone needs to know they have to support the decision that the board has made. It's not an individual's decision. It's not the head teacher's decision. It's not necessarily the owner's decision. It's the board's decision. The board has a life and an entity separate from any individual. And when the board makes those decisions, everyone takes collective responsibility for those, even if they didn't agree with the decision at the time when the decision was made. And so that sort of sense is really important. But the boards are there as much for risk management as anything. So risk management is really key. I sit on a lot of boards where, there is some pretty high risks in the business, and so the board there is to make sure the right questions are asked, the right risks are analysed, the right, profiles are looked at. Obviously discussed key issues, but for me as a chief exec, it's a lonely job running an organisation. We've all been there, and it can be a very lonely position. You need support, and I always used to take the view that when I've got a major problem, I need somebody to talk it through with. I need a sounding board. I need somebody to share it with, and that a problem shared is a problem halved. And of course we need to pray about things, but actually having that other human being just to listen, as well as the Lord to listen to us, it really helps relieve the stress that I was having in some of the major issues that I was addressing in some of my businesses. So, a really good sounding board for checks on key decisions. When Graham wants to make an important decision for Switched On, he doesn't do it without calling me. Now I may say, Graham, of course, no problems. Oh, I might say, actually, Graham, have you thought about this? And he go, oh, no, I haven't. And so we say, well, let's just calm down. Let's think about it. Let's pray about it. Let's come back and discuss it again. Let's think, and then all of a sudden, the decision that we actually make is quite different to what original Graham's idea. Graham's full of ideas, but he also knows that we're all fallible. I am too. The best way to make good decisions is through group discussion. It's through having great data. It's through understanding your organizations. It's understanding what your objectives are. It's understanding where you're going and your strategy. And then sharing that with the key people who have bought into that strategy and vision and making sure that they're party to the decisions that you make. And that's how successful organizations are run forward. So you need on your board some non-execs. I think most schools do. I'm in a non-exec. By the way, I don't do anything. Graham would tell you, I do nothing. I like diving and sailing and traveling and all sorts of other things, but I sit on 7 boards. And I am the sounding board to a lot of chief execs. But I don't actually do anything. That's the job of the executives. And you need to understand the difference between a non-exec, which is me, and an exec, which is Graham, or Daniel. But we did bring a different perspective. When I go into, look, I'm chairing another board meeting. We would get down in Cape Town this week. I'm chairing a board meeting for a big multinational on Wednesday. 4-hour meeting, I'm going to chair it from here. And I haven't got a clue yet what the papers are. I've got 2 of the papers, one the finance paper, one of the operations paper, I've already run. And they're 20, 30 pages each. I haven't read them yet, and when I do, my mind is going to move out from Switched On into that particular organization, and my head's going to go into a totally different space. But I'm going to come to that board meeting with loads of questions, but with a wholly different perspective than all the executives who are living what they're reporting on 24/7. They live it 24/7. You as leaders in your organizations live your schools and organizations 24/7. Your non-exec comes along and goes, I've just been on the golf course, I've been out traveling, I've been sitting in another organization. They come with a wholly different perspective and give you the challenge to check what you're doing is right. Are you still following your strategy? Are you still working on the direction towards your smart objectives or not? Frequency of meetings. Most of my board meetings in my secular organizations are monthly. Most of my school stuff and my academic stuff when I was on the universities were termly, 3 a year. That's the sort of minimum. Maybe 4 a year. We used to have 4 at the university. We had 1 per term and 1 extra strategy day, where the board would come together and have a much more free-flowing, open discussion about, are we on track? Not to rewrite the strategy, but to review the strategy and maybe tweak it a bit, without necessarily changing the smart objectives. And indeed, after 10 years on this particular university, we went and reread our 10-year plan from 10 years ago. And this is the real test. So those of you who do have business plans from, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago, go back and open them up and check, are you doing what you said you'd do? Have you achieved the objectives if they were smart and measurable, and if they weren't, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to check whether you've got there or not. But if they were smart objectives, have you managed to achieve those smart objectives? Because most people write their business plan, they put it under the carpet, they put it in the door, they put it as a doorstop, and they never read it again. That's true, isn't it? Let's be honest. People write business plans with the best intention, they never see it again. Get your 5-year business plan out 5 years later And you'll be, on the whole, if you've been well run, you'll be amazed at how you've done. Because it's there in the leaders. The process of writing the business plan gets it ingrained in the body. As long as it's communicated and agreed, you live it, you breathe it, you don't need to read it. But actually, it's a really good practice to go back and reread what you wrote 5 years ago. And I remember when we did that at the university, we had met almost all our objectives, not all of them, but almost all. We were substantially on track. And actually, we'd done a really good job, and we all patted ourselves on the back. Now, that's not, always the case. But actually, that particular university did really, really well. And it's obviously holding executives to account and regulatory oversight. So I think I've said that. So that's all oh, one too many. Hang on. There we are. That's it. So I hope that's sort of a flying tour of my experiences as a Christian in secular organizations, secular business organizations, that mainly are trying to grow. That's not necessarily the objectives you need to set. As I said, you can set objectives to say, we want to stand still. That's still a very sensible objective, but it means you've got to think about how we're going to stand still, because you're going to have regulatory pressures, you're going to have COVID, you're going to have competition, you're going to have all sorts of things coming up in your business world that will push you off track unless you've got a strategy to say, wherever your objectives are. Okay, thank you. Questions?
We've been really fortunate. I mean, we've got a senior executive in the UK working for Bournemouth Christian School. Our title was called 25 Children, and Switch on Education. And I can really say, Don, the growth that we've had in Switch on Education is really down to planning, financial planning. And I think one of the things I've gained is Don is firm. Really firm on the business, really firm on the question. You don't want a board members coming in, and as Don says, patting on the back. Don is ruthless. If that's not working, why is it not working? Let's drop this, etc. My question, Don, is we've really gleaned a lot, and I've gleaned a lot personally on the business world. Is there a forum we could create that some of the other executives here could glean some of the business advice that you do? Whether it's term, Zoom, or whatever, is there? I'm not saying you don't answer now, but...
No, look, I'm certainly open for that. It doesn't need to be just me. We could have invited speakers who know far more than I do. If it was something that the switched on group of leaders here wanted to have, that we could support within Switched On for more the more business side of the organisation rather than the academic side, I think it'd be a great idea. Look, ultimately, we at Switched On here are here to support you. We want you to be successful businesses. We want you to be successful at school. Of course, I was going to ask a question actually, which I've forgotten. It may or may not be relevant. How many of you think that your students are your customers? And how many of you think your parents are your customers? Can I have a show of hands?
Which one?
Both? Okay, so you'd say both? You'd say both? Okay. Anyone want to focus? No, I think it should be parents, or I think it should be pupils. Students? You say parents? You say parents? Graham? You say students? You say both? Okay.
Who pays the bill?
Who pays the bill? Look, I'm sorry. Asher. I'm with Asher. Actually, from a business perspective, it's who pays the bill. Who enters the legal contract? So at a junior school, it's the parent, it seems to be. Look, they're your primary customers. Of course, the students are important. I'm not in any way saying the students are not important, but they're the part of almost a part of the product. When you get to university, who's making the decisions there? So your customer has changed. And a lot of our schools here are moving from the parent being the customer to the student being the customer as they go through matriculation, graduation, and maturity. And you've got to think about that journey, about where is your focus, how are you incentivizing, or how are you helping your customers to be, your students, to make better decisions for them in terms of, we've talked about how do they choose the right courses, why do they choose the right universities. But we're trying to educate young people to be good customers, good decision makers. But I'm sort of with Asher here in terms of the customer is the person who pays the bill and who enters the legal contract to pay that bill. That from a legal perspective is the customer, albeit that the student, of course, is critical. But just back on Gwen's point, look, if there's a general interest in having another stream to Switched On, which is about business support, well, we can talk about that.
So could I just ask, if you are interested, could you send get a general consensus? Say, listen, that will be a forum I'd be interested in. Sorry, Barry, you're the man.
Questions? Renelle?
I just want to say, if you've got students, you've got to have parents.
Yeah. Look, I'm not saying the student's not important. Of course, the students, we don't have a business without students. And I'm not saying the student is not part of the customer. And of course, they influence their parents. You know, look, I mean, you know. So look, I'm not trying to make a fundamental thing here. I'm trying to make you think. You know, in terms of the business perspective, of course, the student is probably the most important. But who is it your marketing is going to go to? Are you going to go and market to kids? Are you going to go and put adverts up on CBeebies and the children's channel? No. You're going to put your ads up in a website that's going to attract parents.
Sorry, no, I think our session is...
Oh, yeah, sorry. Barry, go on.
One quick question. Is there some good advice you can provide to our schools with debt collection?
Debt
Or is
collection.
it difficult one in a Christian school?
Yep.
And
Okay.
the answer around this.
Okay.
That's a difficult one, but...
Okay. Debt collection, yeah, okay. In my experience, employing a debt collector pays dividends. In other words, it is rare that I see that a debt collection department doesn't pay for itself. All right? That doesn't mean to say you need one, but if you've got a lot of debts, employ a specialist to do it. Now, you need to distance yourselves from that person because they need to be a hard-nosed person. We're all good-minded, loving Christian educators, and we hate conflict with parents who don't pay. We hate it. So get a Rottweiler in to do it for you. Distance yourself. They'll pay for their way. So that's my view on. I'm sorry to say. Thank you.